Yeah. We'll go ahead and get started if everybody's about ready. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you. All right. First, thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate you attending and being present, because we're making a move at United Way to go in a different direction, where we've gone from normal regular applications and designation type funding as we're moving to more grant style funding. So this is our first foray into this. So thank you. Some of you in here are partner agencies, and some are partner agencies, and some of you are new agencies, which is what we wanted to see in this new process. So as you all know here, we're here to kick off the first RFP, which will be for empowering employment. And so with that, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So first, I will go through the agenda, and I'll handle the first slide, which will talk a little bit about the history and kind of United Way and how we got to where we are today, and then maybe a little bit about to where we're moving. Then Emily Baxter, who many of you know and have worked with in the community, will be talking about grant priorities. I'm sorry, about process and grant priorities and evaluation criteria. And then the grant process and timeline, Ross Chapman will kick off and talk a little bit about that. And again, many of y'all know Ross, working through him. And then Margaret's going to take us through the EC impact overview. And then she'll kick it over to Doug Berry, who's going to go through the logic model training for you guys. And then one of the last things is we're going to do question and answer. And what I would like to ask you, if at all possible, if you could please hold our questions to the end, and then that way we can really have a good discussion on what's going on. So let's go to the next slide. Oh yeah, this does look a little bit different.
You made it flip right here.
Yeah, no, that's so. Let's talk a little bit about the old United Way and where we were. So when you look at the old United Way, we're looking at a wide focus. So traditionally, we would have partner agencies out there that would cover a myriad of things in the community, and fit needs everything from youth success to disaster relief, employment, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, all those kind of different things out there, and it wasn't a targeted focus. And so it was kind of like what I call the peanut butter approach. You're just kind of spreading, you're going and fundraising, and you're spreading money across the community, and you're affecting things, but you're not necessarily affecting change. And so it was a closed funding process, and what that meant was you had these partner agencies, and nobody else was able to come in and gain funding. So we had long-standing partners, and we funded those partners. And it was just kind of a churn. And in some of those programs, we were, funding to sustain. So it was an issue of every month they counted on the United Way check to stay in business. And so it didn't foster collaboration into the community. And that's something what this process is for. So planning for the future. So one of the things that happened in the community is we went out and we talked to community partners, and we said, hey, what do you want to see from a funding perspective? And so they're looking at how do we really affect change in the community. And it was an overall process that they went through, talked to community leaders, nonprofit organizations, some industry that all came together and said, hey, we want to really affect change in the community. And one of the ways that we felt like we could do that was, how do we affect poverty? So instead of, what we talked about the old way, where we've got this large funnel of things that we're funding, we're trying to bring that down into one thing and affect poverty, which really can change everything. So it's to go from old to new, kind of the way I always like to describe it is, are you treating the wound, or are you treating what actually caused the wound? And so that's what we're trying to do, is actually get to the source of the problem. So with that, now we're kind of into the new United Way. We're starting our first foray, and that first foray is gaining employment, which you all know about, and it's going through the RFP process. So over time, we are developing a strategic plan that will move from the partner agency funding to, in the future, that we will get to all grant style funding, where all of these little pockets of things that affect poverty, we will be doing multi-year grants to fund those things. Now, one thing, these grants are not going to be, ongoing. So in other words, you get a grant for 3 years. It doesn't automatically renew in 3 years. That doesn't mean we couldn't fund that same initiative, but it just means that we want to give it time for either to allow other programs to come in and affect that, or possibly we get to a point where we've got that issue taken care of, and that agency that's taking care of that issue is fully sustained with other funding and that kind of stuff, and then we can move on to affect other change. So with that, I will stop and turn it over to Emily, who will take us into the rest of it.
It's quiet in here. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I'm glad I saw Richard take his mask off. They gave me permission to do that. So, I know a lot of you all in the room, some familiar faces. And, this morning I felt like I was coming back home, because that's exactly what I'm doing. Yeah. Coming back home for a bit. And so, of course, when I was at United Way, I was there 10 years or more. Great relationships that were developed. And back then, we were really focusing on education, income, and health. That was our whole thing. I mean, we had that elevator speech down pat. And there was nothing wrong with that, because it was needed, right? But now we do need to get out of that. We need to move forward. And so to think of some other things, to kind of think outside the box, if you will. So we are going to talk about, Richard's already set us up for what we are really focusing on now, which is employment. And
if you wouldn't mind standing up, sure. We're going to try to record this, y'all.
So, and you didn't want me to be the superstar.
And you can, hopefully the microphone will pick you up there a little bit.
Loud. Okay. Just be loud. Yes, okay. All right. So, again, we're focusing on employment. And so you may say, why employment? And I'm gonna read a lot from this paper, because I didn't study like I should have, kind of like a pastor. You just get up and wing it. So research shows that while a strong job market is necessary, it's necessary for families to be upward mobile. But many families need assistance in finding and connecting to jobs, and we know that. And so I have one of my British Out of Poverty cohorts in here. We know that it's a hard thing. A lot of the families that you are serving are working 2 and 3 jobs, right? Piecemealing all of those jobs together just to be able to pay their basic needs. And so at United Way, we're looking at how can we work with partners and agencies who are really focused on that, to not just get someone a job, hopefully that'll go into a career, but something that's sustainable, something that is long-term. So, some of your programs, you already may be working with some folks that are employed, but it may be part-time, right? It may not be full-time. And so we really want to focus on programs that are helping people who are underemployed. And when I saw that in the notes, I thought, underemployed, it reminded me of Bank on Evansville. So we have banks all throughout this community. We have a large population of folks that didn't have that mainstream banking experience because they were underbanked. And so what did the city of Evansville do? Along with United Way, we figured out a way to be able to help families get banked, stay banked, and be able to do some upward mobility. So, if you by a show of hands, I'm just gonna ask, who in the room has a program right now as we speak that is helping someone with employment? Okay, give yourself a hand. But you probably are thinking, I could maybe beef it up, right? I can maybe beef it up, maybe offer some incentives, maybe just dive in a little bit deeper, because if you're doing employment, you're probably doing 100 other things, right? That's what most of our partners are doing. You're doing 100 other things, not just focused on one. So we're going to focus on agencies and work with agencies, though, that are prioritizing this employment world, okay? We're just gonna throw it out there. That's what we're gonna do. Not saying all your other programs are great, but this is what we're really going to focus on. So a few years ago, there was a company in Michigan called Cascade Engineering, and their job retention was loopy, up and down and up and down. And so they put on their smart cap and said, how can we keep folks working? How can we keep folks interested in being here and us just kind of being a partnership and a family for our employees? Well, then they created things inside of their company that was going to help keep folks at work, such as childcare. And I know that Toyota is probably one of the few companies here in Evansville that offers that. And so when you think about that, maybe we can build some incentives in to keep folks, working long term. Maybe, and I think right now, this is a good time for our nonprofit partners to have a strong partnership with corporations. Because it shouldn't be, here's a corporation and here's the nonprofit partner. And so sometimes I hear from my nonprofit partner family members, they say, these corporations need to stop telling us what we need to do. They're not on the ground. They're not working. I see that from Gina. They're not working with families every day. So we really need to have a strong partnership. Wouldn't you agree? It's a perfect timing, a perfect climate for you all to make those happen, to go in and just have a conversation. Take them to lunch. Find out who they favorite baseball, or it's going to say the Otters, right? It should be the Otters, baseball team. But I'm just saying, find a commonality, find common ground, because once you build those relationships, the conversation will flow a little easier, and you'll just really want to work harder because you have that partnership. It'll just be a natural fit, right? So I'm going to move on. So, but we care about the type of jobs too that you're going to be helping your clients and families get. We care about those type of jobs. So I'm not saying that anything is wrong with a fast food restaurant, but is that going to really gain some upper mobility long term? Maybe two jobs have to be piecemeal together. I'm going to look at Denise over here at Cafeterias because I love their new program. Denise, tell everybody what that is.
Handy Helpers Home Repair.
Handy Helpers Home Repair. And so I even like the definition. It's really going out there and kind of courting people who, again, have 2 or 3 jobs and maybe kind of a grasshopper work history. And it was personal for me because when I looked at the job description, I thought about my own kid who was 25 years old, but he has a good job now, but he didn't always get it. And so I was going to reach out to Denise personally and say, can my kid be in this program? He's had a grasshopper work history. And so, but not just him, but others have had some job histories that may have made them a little shy about applying, such as some criminal history. So I know for a fact that Toyota manufacturing right now is 1,400 people. And I know that they hire felons. And so it's like, that's a perfect opportunity for our nonprofit partners to tap into that. And I know that they're looking for folks that are begging. Even some of the testing that they have been giving, they have, one of the tests I think they have just taken off the board because people are not passing it. So people have asked me, is it a drug test? I'm like, I don't think it's the drug test, but I don't know what test it is, but I don't think it's that one. So yeah. So again, a great opportunity. Bless you. So we know that getting a job is important, but keeping a job is what really is going to help families move upward. And so let's just say someone, again, has a job, but maybe that job has some advancement opportunities. You see that coming down the pipe. So if your program, is supporting that, if they can get a higher wage or move into a different department, that's something that's as important, as getting a stable job. How can they move up? How can they move up? Well, how are you going to be able to track all of that? Does anybody, you all throw me out an idea. Like, do you have any ideas of how you can keep up with that person once you help them get a job? Any thoughts around that? Once they get a job, how can you really track to see how they're doing? Are they reporting to work every day? What kind of mechanisms do you have in play? Does anybody have a success story in the crowd that can help maybe a neighbor partner? Anybody? Don't be shy.
We connected with the employer and just checked on them every 30, 60, 90 days to see if they were still employed. And after 90 days, we would check in 6 months because we wanted to prove that Bridge Builders actually help families succeed, that it wasn't just about the employee, it was about the people that were affected in the household by that person maintaining full-time employment. And what we found was not only did people maintain their jobs longer when they had reliable transportation, they also were relieved of stresses that allowed them to move up into higher positions and raises and bonuses and things like that. Okay. But after the 6 months, we kind of fell off the wagon.
Okay. Because that's what we really want you to be able to do. We want you to be able to quantify it. We want you to be able to track it. We don't want you to say, we got someone a job. Hey, see you later. Good luck. We want you to be able to follow that person, and you create the mechanism to do that. You know, it's not up to us to do that and to tell you how, but because you work best. And they trust you. They're at your agency for a reason, so they trust you. And so, you know, just really think about how that can be really great and long-term help the client. I want to say customer because I'm a good utility, so I'm always going to say customer. Yeah. So I'm going to look at one of my agency partners right now. I'm looking right at her. She's looking at Gina. You have a program at the Evansville Christian Life Center for women who have babies, like baby bucks, or tell us how. And so I'm just throwing out an example of an incentive that you all have.
Sure. So we partnered along with our Gang Anti-Poverty Initiative, but families come into our Family Care Services Department, and we have over 100 classes they can take online, or we have in-person classes. And so they're assigned an advocate that helps walk them through that journey. So we're staying with the family from 12 to 18 to 24 months or longer, depending on what stage they come in at. But they can get incentive items that they need if it's a young parent that has an infant or young children, from cribs, car seat formulas, bottles, diapers, that type of thing. And so then a part of GAIN, Anti-Poverty Initiative, we're doing the tracking thing also. And so when a family joins our cohort of our GAIN initiative, they actually are tracked every 3 to 6 months, and that's put in. Hopefully our charity tracker will be up very soon. And so, but we track those things now. And so we're staying with that family 12, 18, 24 months, and then they're a part of the network. And so they're with us even longer after that. So we're tracking those families as they move forward, and then now in 4 counties doing GAIN cohorts.
Okay, so that's another great example of how the mechanisms that they put in place to do that. So again, you know, we know you all know what you're doing. And so be creative. You know, this is an opportunity to be creative as well. So, you know, finding employment again may be harder for some than others. You know, again, people who are in that Alice story, that asset limited income constraint employed. Give me a hand for that. Yes. So again, people with criminal history. So, so when we're talking about measurement, very simple. We're looking for programs to quantify their success. At a minimum, all programs should track the total number of people they serve. Of that group, how many people successfully obtained new employment or expanded existing employment or increased wages and hours, or wages or hours. Basic demographics of the people that you serve, okay? So, you know, we have a lot of folks, you know, I love it that we are looking more like a big city with a melting pot of different people from all backgrounds. And so, you know, hopefully when you're helping your clients and customers get employment, you know, we have people who know how to speak Spanish. We have, you know, employment services for people who are handicapped. So just, you know, be creative. We're glad you came. We want to be able to help how we can, but we do want to be specific of what we're looking for, okay? All right, thank you. And I think I'm turning it over to Ross. And hey, guess who's a part of Charity Tracker? Center Point Interview. Yes.
Well, hey everybody, I'm Ross Chapman. I lead a nonprofit called For Evansville, and I started serving on the United Way board last year. And my journey with United Way is pretty fun. I went to one of those nonprofit fairs that you all set up your booth. I think this one, I don't remember where it was even, but it was right when I moved back. And one of the United Way staff members said, you should be a community investment volunteer. And I was like, that sounds fun. What's that mean? It was a great way to just get to know a lot of y'all, learn what you're doing. And it was a cool way to get to know the community as well. So that was 2016. And basically since then, they just sort of asked me to keep going in my journey with United Way. And it's been really, really
He looks
fun.
at me.
So now I'm real excited to be part of the impact council or committee that's really focused on, how are we going to see and affect change in the community. So thanks for being here. Thanks for the work that you're doing. It really is an awesome thing to be part of this community and see so many people passionate about how do we help people around us? How do we actually extend love to them and help them find employment that matters? So thanks. So I want to go over the timeline, a little bit of the process as well. And we're adding in something at the end of our process that we think will be really cool and fun and helpful. So a couple key dates. And I first want to just say that all of this information is on EC Impact. EC Impact is the system that you will be applying through if you apply for funds to the GERF fund or the Community Response Fund for COVID, same system. So you might have some familiarity with that. And Margaret is going to actually show us that. So we have some, so we're not totally novices. So today, 8/12, open information session. We're recording this, our first kind of step, let you guys know, ask questions, learn more about the RFP and how your programs or ideas really can fit into that. So that's where we are here. And then circle September 17th, Friday. That's when everything is due. Okay, so that's your key date. We would like everything submitted by then. And then just a few weeks later, we'll let you know if you're a finalist. So finalists will be identified, and then finalists will then make a live presentation on October 15th, which is also a Friday. So make a note of that. We don't know how many finalists. That depends on how things come in and how things go. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, what that presentation looks like. And then if you're awarded, you'll be notified by the end of October, so you can kind of plan for that in your future budgets. And then we'd actually receive formal awards and contract the following week. We would want your signed contracts back that you agree to do the reporting. So basically every 6 months, we're gonna want some kind of report, and then the final one at the end of the 24 months. And then of course we'll make announcements right around Thanksgiving, and then the formal funding starts January 1. So that's kind of a quick overview of the process. And like I said, you can grab this in the EC Impact system as well. The key dates that you probably want to walk out here remembering is September 17th, and then October 15th is your finalist. Okay, so let's go to the next slide and the presentation. So this has not been a part of United Way application process that I'm aware of. Maybe it was a long time ago, I don't know. And maybe in other places. But what we were thinking when we came up with this idea was, I'm a nonprofit leader. I fill out applications for funding a lot, and you don't ever get to say everything you want. You can't communicate the tone or the passion or the result the way that you probably want to. And more importantly, I think, is it's a computer screen. And so we decided, like, let's get in the room together. Let's build some relationship. Let's have the opportunity to engage on a personal level. We're all in this thing together. And so let's act like it. And so we just want to give you guys just an opportunity, just to present. And so we're going to have, more of a structure for everybody to kind of prepare similarly and keep it fair. So, we'll be sending you kind of, here's the key things we want you to cover. We'd love it if, a board member or some other really involved community person would be with you. Somebody who's benefiting from this particular program or idea that would come along with you. Maybe you can do that, maybe you can't, but if you can, then bring them along. We'd love to do that. And full list of topics to cover would be provided in EC Impact as well. So that's it's not going to be super intimidating, even if you don't like presenting. We want to keep it light and fun almost. So you'll have 15 minutes to kind of present, and then 15 minutes for just Q&A afterwards. But I think it's really important in our community that we build those relationships. Everything moves at the speed of trust. And so this is an opportunity to do that even in an application process. So we're really excited about that. Okay, I think that's all I had to cover. So Margaret, I'll pass it to you and you can teach us all about EC Impact.
Okay. All right, hi folks. I'm Margaret Stuckey. I know some of you already, some of you maybe not so much. I am the Director of Community Impact at United Way. Kind of new to the organization, so I'm still meeting a lot of folks. Before that time, I was with Evansville Goodwill, and before that time, I was in Chicago, ran a nonprofit in Chicago. So worked in nonprofits all my life, really excited to be back in Evansville and supporting the local nonprofit community. So really quickly, I know most of you, I've seen the list of people in the room, and I think most of you are probably already fairly familiar with EC Impact. Whether or not you've been a United Way partner, most of the people in the room have applied to the COVID fund. So you probably already have an account for this portal. If you don't worry, you can contact me and we can get you hooked up with an account. Minimal information needed there. Okay, so are you gonna? I'll go ahead and drive so I can log in. Okay. Really, is it? So if you're totally new to EC Impact, it's not too scary. The most important thing to remember, if you can't find it or you don't know the link, come to our website, unitedwayswi.org, and then any page, it doesn't matter what page, just scroll down to the footer and there's that little login button. So if you go there, you can go there. And this first link for community partners, people applying for grants, you can sign in. I'm going to attempt to sign into my little test account here, and hopefully that will work. Sorry. No, the agency one. Is this it? Yeah. Okay. So hopefully I can log into my test account and show y'all what this is supposed to look like. Okay. So for most of you, when you log in, your homepage is going to be cluttered with way more stuff than this because you have existing grants and relationships with the COVID Fund or United Way. So yours will look a lot more busy. But I just want to highlight the important things that you should check out. Number one, register for new grant opportunities. You will not automatically be assigned to this grant. You do have to register for it. We didn't want to assign everyone because we have a lot of partners who don't work in other areas. So click on there. The first thing you will see will be related to the COVID Relief Fund. Just keep scrolling. Down at the bottom is where the Empowering Employment application is listed. Go ahead and click. And you will have, again, there's a little bit of the details about the grant specifically. Just click through to register. And once you have done that, you will have a new link up here, over here in your apply and reports box. And then, whenever you log out or log back in, you will have that link available to you to take you directly to your application. Again, some of the reminders here, deadlines. This is, most of you are familiar, there are two sets of forms that you will need to complete. The first set of forms is agency level forms. So each, and I know it looks like a lot, but they're not all very lengthy. So basic contact information, some government compliance. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask what type of financials you guys are going to be looking for?
So you will need to provide both a budget for your overall agency, and then you will need to provide a specific budget for the program itself. So we know a lot of agencies maybe run multiple programs. So we would like an overall agency and a program specific budget. And you will be asked to submit supporting financial documentation, such as previous 990s and things like that. So this is the list of financials and where you can upload your financial documents. And right here is where you can add your program. So you can just put in a program name and save and complete that registration. And once you've done that, the second set of forms will appear. So this is all agency specific. This is program specific. And again, you will have to click through each one. I know it looks like a lot. I promise it's not that bad. All of these will need to be listed as, I'll just give you a little example. If you click through, you can use the Save My Work button as you work through the application. Once you're completely done with a form, you will need to say save and mark as complete. And once you've marked all the forms as complete, a submit button will pop up and allow you to submit. Can't submit until everything is marked as complete. The other major thing I wanted to make sure that you guys see over here is the Resource Center. So we've provided a lot of different resources for you just to have at your fingertips so you don't have to go scouring the internet. Some previous reports regarding Alice. Some of these things are relevant to maybe other grants and not necessarily pertinent here, but this link in particular are documents regarding this grant opportunity. So a lot of the backgrounds and the specifics that Richard and Emily spoke about, timelines, things like that. The actual timeline in this will have all the details. Oops. Even this will have all the details, including the payment schedule and the reporting schedule. Glossary of terms. So if we mention some terminology you're not familiar with in the application itself, hey, you can go look it up in our glossary. When we say Alice, what does that mean? That's just a helpful little reference there. And this one, I really do want to point out to people. We will mention the term living wage in this application quite a bit. We know that not all jobs provide a living wage. Obviously, we want to see people moving into jobs that do provide a living wage. The living wage standards that we are using are primarily the MIT standards, the living wage calculator. And this is a great document that references those standards. You can click the link to get specifics about your community, and it is broken down county by county. And that we've provided the tables there. So you can have some expectation of what do we mean when we say a living wage, and do you think the jobs that you're connecting people with are about in that wage range. Okay, then if I can get back to my right tab. And then finally, I did want to point out, Ross told everybody about the final presentations. Now, you're going to be notified of a finalist status with maybe about a week before the actual presentations are going to happen. So we realize that's not a ton of time to prepare. So we're giving you all the questions in advance. Right there, they're in EC Impact. This is what we would like your presentation to cover. So make sure you don't need to jot them down because they are saved in EC Impact, and you can go back and reference these. But as Ross mentioned, about a 15-minute presentation covering these questions, which some similarity with the general application itself, but it goes into a little bit more detail and helps, maybe give a little more context and story about your program. So those are the EC Impact basics that you need to know. Again, you register for the opportunity, and then once you're registered, you will have the 2 sets of links. All right, any questions about EC Impact before I'm going to turn it over to Doug, and he is going to walk you through a little bit of information that will hopefully be helpful as you fill out your logic model. Any EC Impact questions? If you run into problems, we don't want the tech to stand in the way. We don't want the technology to be a burden. So if you run into problems, you can always call me, email me, and we'll work through it. We want this to be simple and user-friendly. And if it's not, we will fix it as best we can. All right. Doug, if you want to take it from here, Doug Berry is from Deal Consulting. And for those of you who are existing United Way partner agencies, you're probably very familiar with United Way standards for logic models and measurement tracking, things of that nature. If you're a little bit newer to our partnerships, some of this might be new expectations or new standards, and Doug's going to give a nice training so you guys will all be well equipped to complete that aspect of the application. All right.
Hey, we're great on time.
Okay.
Anybody need a quick break because I'm going to pass out.
Oh, cool. We are doing great on time.
And the bathroom code is right there.
Bathroom code is here. If y'all want to take a, I guess, a five or so minute break, you can do that. All right. Good on time.
Y'all are rocking it, man.
I thought that was the Wi-Fi code.
What's that?
I thought that was the Wi-Fi.
Bathroom code.
No, it's actually the Wi-Fi code.
They left them unboxed earlier this morning, but I thought we should post that just in
They probably get a lot of passerbys that pop in.
I think they do. I think they do. I think they tend to look up.
Take them up on that offer.
Oh, she's coaching all the way. Okay, everybody, I think we're gonna get started again. So for those of you who've done United Way applications before, not the COVID fund, some of this will probably seem familiar, but if you're new and you've not been through that process before, we wanted to make sure everybody is speaking the same language, everyone has the same expectations and information. So we did want to make sure you had the opportunity to do this training with the deal consulting. Before we get to that, there's one other member of the United Way team that I wanted to introduce y'all to. Ruben, if you want to pop up here.
Absolutely.
So this is Ruben Yeto. He is our the new community impact officer for United Way, and so he is going to be working with all of our grantees from all over the map and getting to know all of you guys really well. So this is what your fourth. This is Ruben's fourth day on the job.
They keep cheering me back every day, so I have to come back to see their excitement. Like, he's still here.
He's still here. He's still here.
I'm excited to be here, folks.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Doug. I know some of you already know Doug, but with Deal Consulting, most everybody knows Deal Consulting. So he will walk you through the training.
Thanks, Margaret. And it's great to see everyone again that I do know. Great to see the new faces, maybe more so. Just given this shift, it's very exciting for us. So yeah, our firm gets involved in kind of a variety of different analytical work, but with nonprofits, we're mostly known for program evaluation. And so before I can get started, we're going to talk a lot about what we mean by evaluation. But I want to start with what evaluation is not, at least from my perspective. It's kind of a loaded term. What we find, and let me know if I'm not a very loud guy. So hopefully I'm projecting enough today. What we find when we start conversations about evaluation is that it's associated with two things which are really untrue. One, judgmental, and two, final. So when you're talking evaluation, especially in the context of reporting to a funder, I mean, there is that compliance aspect, so it can feel judgmental. But at its core, evaluation is about program improvements, about identifying what's going well so that we can maximize those successes. And it's about telling your story of what's going well, telling the story of the impact you're having to the United Way, to other funders, to your staff, to your participants. It's about United Way being able to tell the story of how they're advancing this pathway to employment. So if we can kind of, I know it's easier said than done, but take the judgmental fears out of the conversation about evaluation, I think they'll be much more effective. And then secondly, as far as the finality, evaluation is associated with results, right? What at the end of your program, we want to know what impact you had. And that is true. I mean, part of it is measuring impact, but as you'll see as we go through these slides, evaluation is really, it's a conversation best started at this stage in the game. So much of it revolves around planning and getting things in place from the beginning of the intervention or the program and then tracking it throughout. So thanks for humoring me there. On the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do today. I'm going to try to blend the theoretical with the practical. So on the theoretical side, if you will humor me, there are some core evaluation principles that we're going to talk about a little bit. But on the practical side, the main goal of this part of the session is for you all to understand what you're going to be. My wife's a teacher. I've been talking to my kids over the first day, so I want to know what I'm graded on, right? What is this going to be on the test? What am I going to be graded on with this application? And we don't want any ambiguity there. We want it to be very clear. These are the things the panelists are going to score on your application. This is where in the application you can address these things. And importantly, I think, on the first slide, we don't need to go back to it, but you may have noticed there were two dates listed on the first slide. Today is one, and then next month, we'll be delivering the same information to the panelists who will be scoring applications. So we want there to be the shared language, the shared understanding of what should be in the application, what they should be looking for. So, I mean, but this is part of the deal. Applications are going to be scored, but what we don't want is for anyone to leave thinking, you know, oh, I could have said more about that if I knew that was an expectation. I didn't know where to put that. Thanks. We'll go to the next slide. This is probably more easily legible on your handout than it is up here, but this is the full list of the panel indicators. We're not going to talk about all of them today, but just as kind of an overview, there are 4 indicators around agency capacity. Margaret pointed out that section in EC impact. These are not scored in terms of a numeric score. These are what we call single hurdle indicators, just yes or no. If any of those 4 are not true, you're not going to have a very competitive application. But as Margaret showed, EC impact kind of walks you through each of those different sections. It will be really hard to miss one of those sections unless you just don't complete your application. The rest of them are going to be scored on a 3-point scale. 0, there's no evidence that this indicator is present at all. 4, there's complete satisfactory evidence that this indicator is being met, and then 2 is kind of that middle ground. But yeah, there's some signs that this indicator is being met, but there's questions remaining. So within the remaining 3 sections, financial capacity, you can see the indicators there. It's not really my domain. We're not going to talk about that much this morning. We'll certainly know what you scored on. Program design, you'll notice that there's more indicators around program design than any of the other sections. That's not an accident. The planning committee that came together to determine these scoring criteria wanted to weight program design most heavily. And the way we do that is by making sure that each individual aspect of program design is being measured. And the logic model, which is primarily what we'll talk about today, kind of deals with the evaluation. So in total, 6 out of the 16 will really kind of be the focus of today's meeting, but we wanted you to have all of these as well. Well, will be the focus of my portion of today's meeting, I should say. And you can go ahead. So any good conversation about evaluation starts with theory of change, a term that may be familiar to some, maybe less familiar to others. There's a couple of ways we describe it. The first, I like to start with this comic up here. So you've got a couple of professor and student working through some kind of long equation on the board. They've got the beginning of their proof, then a miracle happens, and then they finish it out. And theory of change is really just about defining your miracle. What's happening in there that leads to change. I think that that's kind of the best way to describe this intentional path. Another way that's helpful for folks to look at it on the next slide, and you can really hit it probably about 4 times. Just kind of that if-then statement. If we implement X, then we can expect Y outcome because of some kind of rationale. If we provide this level of job training to this number of individuals, then we can expect this percentage of those individuals will gain new or expand their employment because of some rationale. That rationale, it could be a research base. It could be that you're modeling best practices, and this is outcomes that others in the model have seen. It could be that this is a program that's not made for your organization, and you've got 2, 3, 10 years of data showing that this works. There's no rhyme or reason there. This particular example up here has some peer-reviewed articles as research, because obviously that's the example we're going to use. That's not the expectation across the board, but there should be some rationale that defends that if-then statement. If we do this, then we can expect this to happen. That's our theory of the change scenario. Questions about theory of change? So let's get a little bit practical with it. On the next slide, there are actually 3 indicators more time. 3 of the indicators that we're going to talk about are listed up here. The program description provides clear program goals and activities. The activities described would understandably lead to clients' employment. I mean, that indicator number 8, that could just say theory of change. That's what theory of change is. There's a clear link between the activities that are being implemented and the expected outcomes. And then the target population is clearly defined, and others have talked about prioritizing specific populations, maybe underserved, vulnerable populations. And the red boxes beneath each panel are areas of the application that we would direct you to knowing that you're going to be scored on these indicators. So 2 specific items under panel indicator number 7, 3 specific items in the application below panel indicator 9, panel indicator 8, because that is kind of the broader theory of change. Those are entire sections. You'll have the opportunity to talk about not only what your expectations are for clients gaining employment, but supports that you're going to provide, the kinds of jobs that they're expected to get, all based on the particulars of the program that you're implementing. Everybody good so far? Okay. So on the next slide, we'll shift gears. Logic model, again, if you're familiar with the term, this is going to be old hat. If this is newer evaluation speak for you, logic modeling can sound kind of intimidating, but it's pretty basic stuff. This is just the depiction of the theory of change. And as we unpack on the next slide, what goes into a logic model. If you Google logic model, you'll see 1,000 different images pop up. There is no one right way to do it, but there are some core components that are some of the things that you'll be asked about as you develop the logic model in this application are your inputs. Okay, things like training that was necessary for staff to be able to implement this program. Did you have to hire new staff? Did you have to expand hours of staff? Funding, okay, is a big input. Time. And inputs, the best way I can describe those is we all have stakeholders that it doesn't take very long for the conversation to turn to this idea of return on investment. What's the return on what we've invested? What have we invested? Those are your inputs. So you have the opportunity to list those out in your application. The activities are really the meat of your program. Are you providing job training? Are you directly participating in the job search with your clients? Are you providing childcare that will directly impact an individual's ability to work or work a different schedule? Just what are you actually doing as part of the program? And then the outputs or process indicators that we call here, these are measures of implementation. So how many people have been served? In what ways have they been served? The best way I think to understand outputs is to continue down and talk about outcomes. Outcomes are what's the result of those activities and outputs, right? What's new or better or different in your clients' lives as a result of this? So process measures collectively, these are about how it's being implemented, how your program is being implemented. Outcome measures, what are the changing conditions as a result of what's being implemented? Just a note there, the highlighted line at the bottom. Outcomes get a lot of focus, but neither one of these is more or less important than the other. A solid program evaluation when it comes to really identifying program improvements, program strengths, really communicating the story, it requires both process and output evaluation. So we're going to talk about each of them in turn. We've really, Amy, if you click one more time, we've really talked about a lot of these already. Just some examples here. These aren't comprehensive lists, but inputs, activities, outputs, collectively, just how can we build understanding about how the program is going to be done. I'll go back to my earlier comment about evaluation happening at the end or at the beginning, right? These are things that if measured just at the very end of the program, hey, we have to report back to our funder about what we did. Retrospectively, retroactively reporting on how the program was implemented is valuable, which hopefully you can understand how it's much more valuable for the United Way to be requiring essentially grantees, applicants to be thinking about these things at this stage of the process. So it can be kind of a roadmap moving forward. Next slide, please. So just again, bouncing back to the very practical from the somewhat theoretical. In EC Impact, there are a set number of outputs, process measures, if you will, that you'll be asked to choose from. No individual grantee will be reporting on all of these, I wouldn't think, but every grantee is required to report on just the overall number served, as well as one of these other subcategories. So again, depending on what your activities are, what your program entails, what's that going to look like for you? Are you providing job training? Are you providing some other service that makes employment more conducive.
And I did just want to point out to everybody, this is just a list of examples that we preloaded into the system for you. We realize this is not an all-encompassing list. So everyone, you're going to be required to report on total individuals served. That's kind of a no-brainer. But your other outputs, you can write them in custom. If you're doing something unique, if you're doing something innovative that you don't see on that list, not only is that okay, that's great, and we want to know about it. So don't feel that you are constrained to that list alone. This is just a jumping off point that we thought would probably be relevant to a lot of programs.
I believe in the application, don't they ask us what our indicators are, and then the application responds from what we tell it?
It will.
Okay.
This is gonna, it's gonna give you a list. You can select from this if this is relevant to you, but if you have something to write in custom, you can. So just know that.
Thank you.
Veronica, I'm pretty sure I can see a good one for bridge builders.
Well, thank
but,
you.
you know, you might have a custom one as well.
You know, I love my shameless plugs.
So one particular aspect of process evaluation that we want to talk about is what we call program fidelity. So this is just the consistency of the program implementation. Is it being implemented as designed? Amy, if you give me one more click, there are 4 aspects of program fidelity that we tend to look at. Adherence to the program, adherence to the curriculum or the plan or whatever the design was. Is that how it's being implemented? Dosage or exposure has to do with, yeah, how many people are served, but also how are they being served? Is this a half an hour meeting once a month? Is this 2 hours every week as part of the program? What is the actual dosage? What does it need to be served by this program? Participant responsiveness has to do with buy-in, right? Are the clients engaged and bought into what we're doing, or is there resistance on that front? The quality of delivery, again, that is kind of multifaceted. If it is a program that requires some kind of training or certification on staff to deliver it, have those requirements been met? But even beyond that, for any program, it's just are there obstacles? Anything from we were going to show a video during this session that the player didn't work, or you know, we had to reschedule. But just how the quality of the program. So when I talk about fidelity of implementation, I think about you think about a lot of different things. So you think about following a recipe, right? You want to make your grandma's cookies. So are you using the right ingredients? Are you putting enough of the right ingredients in there? Are you have the oven set to the right temperature? Those kind of things. For me, it's easier to think about if you go on a diet. You say I want to lose some weight. I'm going to go on X diet. I'm going to take my weight measurement when I start and when I'm done, and then that's going to tell me if the diet worked. What does that tell you if the diet worked? It's an indicator, but you don't know. What did you stick to it? Did you eat what you're supposed to eat? Did you also exercise on top of it, or did you not? Did you eat healthy throughout the week, but then cheat on weekends? Or, you know, for me, cheat meals are about 4 days out of the 7 in a week. You know, these are the kind of things that there's a lot of real world applications to fidelity of implementation. So we just encourage you to think about your programs in that way. Not just on paper, hey, we're going to provide job training, but what does that really mean? What's the core dosage? What does it really mean to get the service? Where can it vary? You know, not all clients are going to have the same needs. So where are different needs? Questions about program fidelity? That's a bit of a aside. You won't directly see a place on the application where you're asked to describe how your program is going to be implemented with fidelity. This is, again, on the theoretical side, but it is important, I think, to be thinking this way, because that's going to allow you to have better responses to some of these other questions about how data are collected, how the program's run. So outcome evaluation, on the next slide, we have hopefully a repeat of what you've heard before, but on a logic model, it's good to think in terms of short-term outcomes or intermediate outcomes as compared to long-term outcomes. And I think that the most key words on here are the kind of orangish lines at the bottom. What does short or intermediate mean? It means that's a change, that's an outcome that we're likely to be able to see during the reporting period. Long term it's not totally theoretical. I mean, there should be that intentional linkage, and it is important to be thinking about, you know, if this person gains employment within this year, how does their life look different down the road? We don't want to not think about that, but that's not something that's going to be measured during the reporting period. And as a result, the long-term outcomes are not something that you're going to have to really spell out in your application. We'll focus on the other side. Just to spend a little bit more time on this, because I think this is pretty important for this particular RFP and the way things have shifted. Notice that the outcomes and an individual outcome itself is not short-term or long-term. So let me just take the example of people gaining employment. Is that a short-term outcome or a long-term outcome? Well, that depends. And that distinction right there is, I think, the very core of this RFP. There are organizations that say, build social skills in third grade students. Can you draw a link between social skills and employability later in life? Well, sure you can. There's research that supports that, but that's a long-term outcome. That's nothing that can be measured during this reporting period. The applicants who are going to be successful in this RFP, and those of us in this room, are going to be those that are having that direct impact on employment, gaining new employment or expanding employment in a way that it can be measured during this grant cycle. That's anything unfair there?
No, that's perfect.
We've all heard about SMART goals and objectives before. Nothing we came up with, nothing United Way came up with, but I wanted to talk about it just briefly here, because as you go through the application, I think that you'll see each of these elements. You'll see an opportunity to build the case for each letter of the acronym, but it might not be that single SMART sentence that we're used to seeing. So specificity, you are going to be asked to specify exactly the outcome that you're tracking, which there's really 1, 2, kind of 1.5. We'll get to that on the next one. The choices are pretty narrow there, but you'll be asked to specify the target for that. So what percentage of the people you serve specifically do you expect to see that out? Measurability. The last thing that we'll talk about today is around the evaluation plan, data sources, timing of data collection. You'll have the opportunity to build the case that what you're tracking is measurable. This is how you're going to do it. Attainability. When you enter your targets for your outcomes, you'll also be prompted to include a written rationale for how you reach that target. So it's very tempting, I think, to say, well, if I say 100% of the clients I serve are going to be employed at the end of this, that'll make my application more competitive. Or to say, well, I can softball this. I can say we're going to see 10% of people gain employment, then I'll be sure to hit my target. Neither one of those is really advisable from our end. But the idea behind that is there should be, you want it to be kind of challenging but attainable. We think that this percentage can gain employment based on this rationale. Again, it's much like the discussion we had about theory of change. That rationale could be that, hey, we've been doing this for a while. We know that about 3 out of 4, this is really going to work for, and then there's just going to be some attrition. Or it could be that you're modeling after some best practices that are out there, some research based, some kind of rationale. When we talk to the panel and panelists about the indicators, that's the same guidance that we'll give them. That right now, at least, we as the United Way, everybody involved in this process doesn't have a set benchmark where if they're not hitting with at least 80% of their clients, there is no target percentage that in and of itself is good enough or not good enough. It all depends on that rationale that's provided. Relevance, I think, obviously, this pathway for gaining employment, pathway out of poverty, get people jobs. I think everyone's going to be proposing programs that are relevant to that. Time bound is almost like the free space on the bingo card here, because we're talking, there's a set reporting period, a set grant period with the United Way. So either way, you'll have the opportunity to describe each of those things. And we've talked around this several times. I'm not the first speaker today to touch on this, but there are 2 outcomes that you'll be able to choose from, and only number of people gaining employment percentage of people gaining employment, I should say, or percentage of people expanding their employment, more hours, better pay, better position, promotion, things like that. Hopefully by this point, those two weren't a surprise. Hopefully no one's sitting here thinking they were going to track another outcome from that. So yeah, panel indicator 15, the outcomes and expectations of the program are clearly defined with sufficient rationale provided. These are screenshots, exactly what you'll see in the application, where you can plug in the number of people you expect to be served, the number of those that you expect to either gain employment or expand their employment, whichever outcome you selected, the percentage. The percentage might even calculate automatically on that.
I don't think it does.
Okay, well, so then the percent, you got your numerator and denominator, you can calculate the percentage. And then that written rationale box that I talked about.
And for those of you who are not familiar with EC Impact, I kind of forgot to show you this. Anytime you're filling out a question and you see that little green question mark by it, hover over that, and that's going to give you just a little bit of context or might be helpful clues, things to think about while you're answering this question. So it's just a little bit of insider tips there, but that's just a screenshot, so it won't do it. But when you're in the real application, that'll be there.
Okay, we're on the last leg here. So talking about how things are going to be measured, evaluation. We don't want to get up here and talk about a lot of psychometrics, about reliability. There's probably things I could say that will make me sound smarter, but I don't like talking about them, and I don't think you guys want to hear about them. Quite frankly, that's not the level of conversation we want to have here. If you guys can get comfortable with the concepts generally of reliability and validity, that's what we want to talk about. So reliability is kind of consistent measurement. If we say this is how we're going to know if someone has expanded their employment, then whether you're measuring it or someone on your staff is measuring that or somebody down the street is measuring it, expanding employment should mean expanding employment. Validity is kind of related. It's the accuracy. So you think reliability, consistency, validity, accuracy. How accurately are we measuring this? The particular outcomes for this RFP are pretty objective. I mean, they're pretty cut and dry. Was this unemployed individual employed, right? So validity almost becomes kind of a moot point. I would say that the second outcome, expanded employment, there might be a little more room for thinking about that. So they were working X hours, now they're working Y hours. That's pretty clear. They had this position, they've been promoted to a lead this position. That's pretty clear. But what if it's a situation where on paper it looks like someone made kind of a lateral move, but the reality is that they went from a less stable job to a job with more stability, or they went from a position where they were bumping their head on the ceiling to a position with a lot more room for growth. Or, and this gets maybe a little too soft, but I'm kind of a soft guy. They went from a position where they were just there to collect a paycheck to a position that's going to offer them more self-actualization. You can see how expanding employment in that regard, it could be pretty important. It could get pretty important pretty quickly to define exactly what you mean by that. Also, having a system for organizing and managing data. Some of you probably work in organizations where you have a data management system already. Some of you are going to be working in Excel. Both are fine. What I would not recommend is not having a plan for how you're going to store data and things before you start collecting it. And the same thing for the analysis. Again, by and large, this RFP is pretty simple analysis, and we're talking about a percentage here. I mean, there's these criteria, either gaining new employment or expanding employment. Out of the people you serve, how many people did that? But beyond this RFP, if I can just give advice for evaluation planning, but the storage of data and analysis are things to think about at this point. To the right there are some examples. I mean, again, the outcomes for this RFP are pretty objective. I think that if you hit one more time, maybe there's just a note at the bottom that I won't read it. I can remember exactly what it says. It's something along the lines of it really depends. You know, your data sources really depend on the outcomes you're tracking. These outcomes, by and large, are pretty cut and dry. And so we would think that the data collection would be pretty cut and dry, pretty objective data collection, either contact. And Emily did, she stepped out, even did a great job of talking about this. And Veronica, I appreciate your example, but you know, reaching out to employers to get that kind of hard data point. There's not a lot of perceptions involved in what we're tracking for this particular RFP. For others, there might be. On the next slide, that's good. One more for me. We won't spend a lot of time here. Again, just given the nature of this RFP, this is just kind of background information for you. There's a continuum of evaluation designs. There's a continuum of what I would call appropriate evaluation designs. It just depends. Post-test only, that's kind of what I talked about with the results. We're just waiting until the end and we're seeing what the results of what we did were. Then you got your pre-test, post-test design. A lot of times people associate that with surveys. You know, survey at the beginning, survey at the end, see what's changed. But actually the pre-post is applicable anytime you have baseline data. Anytime you have baseline data as well as follow-up data, and you can compare this. So depending on the target population that you're serving, if you're saying we're specifically serving unemployed individuals, and then you know how many gain employment, that's a pre-post design. It's implied. You know the baseline was that 0 of these folks had jobs and how many did again. So pre-post, we'd encourage you to think beyond just surveys, although those you who have worked with us, we do a lot of surveys, so that comes up a lot. At the top, just kind of round this out, comparison groups or even randomly assigned comparison groups. You know, we've identified this pool of individuals who need help with employment. We're going to, at random, choose half of them to provide our services to, and at random, withhold our services from the other half. We're going to see what group has better outcomes. That's what happens. It doesn't happen a lot outside of a university setting or outside of a particular research study where that kind of randomized control experiment is funded. And I think that's good. I don't want you guys to withhold services if you have the capacity to provide them. The reason it's informative to kind of talk through this continuum is as you go up the list, the precision increases. And that's not to say that those at the bottom of the list are not precise or not accurate, but I think that the precision with which you can tie outcomes to your specific service, you can isolate the impact of your specific service, increases as you move up the list. So does the capacity required to implement, both from staff, time, funding, everything like that. So falling kind of somewhere in the middle with that pre-post, we have some kind of baseline. We want to see what's different at the end of our services or after X period of time of our services. That's where we see a lot of people, a lot of prior United Way, successful United Way applicants have fallen. And that's kind of, it's a loose. I want to stop myself from saying that's what we would expect. That's what I would expect, but that's not as prescriptive as it is predictive, right? We're not saying you have to fall anywhere. I suspect that kind of baseline to end comparison is where people fall. I think we have 2 slides left. So again, indicators, the outcomes of the program can be measured. So again, the end and smart, and the measurement tools and processes are reliable and valid. The data collection method is robust. You'll have 2 prompts within, and here again, we don't have in the screenshot that green question mark, but definitely hover over that when you're in there. But describe your method for collecting information about your client's employment. What sources of information will you use? Timing, frequency of the data collection. So this is exactly where you'll build your case. This is exactly where we'll point the panelists to come to their rating on these 2 particular indicators. So I think we have time for large group discussion. Anything particularly around the evaluation logic model, you have my information there. Give me a holler. And yeah, let's open it up for discussion. I think questions about this and overall questions, because I know those were held from
here. Yes, yeah. Any questions you guys got? That's fair game now. Yes.
I have 2 questions. So we're in charge of finding our own client base, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Are there stipulations the person needs to have? Can they be a college graduate but still needing help, or does it have to be a poverty-stricken person, or is there criteria?
Well, that depends on you. We're not going to tell you how to run your program, so we don't put any restrictions on that, but you will be asked to describe what are your selection criteria. So if you impose certain restrictions, like, I have an income threshold, you have to make below this certain amount before you're eligible for services, or we're only working with people who are currently unemployed. If that is something that you dictate for your program, that's up to you to decide. We'll just ask you to explain it, but we're not imposing that. We will say that we are going to prioritize, and that's a word we came back to over and over and over again. We're not excluding anybody, but we will prioritize programs that are actively serving people who are low income, in poverty, or ALICE. So that's what we would primarily want to see. And we will prioritize programs that are making an effort to serve people who have barriers to employment. And we can find that in several different ways.
And Margaret, just to put a finer point on that, the 9th panel indicator, so that's on the list at the beginning, and then we pulled up earlier, says the target population is clearly defined and the program will prioritize serving those with barriers to employment. But I think to Margaret's point, and to kind of just use the example that you asked about, what if it's a college graduate with a criminal, right? I mean, it's up for you. It's up to you to define what those barriers are. I don't think there's
language impaired, so they get through college, but then they won't hire. So,
yeah. I mean, I think making the case that that's a barrier would be my guidance.
Yep. And there are specific questions where you have the opportunity to kind of explain what you mean by that. What is your target population? Who are you meant to serve?
Is the application asking for copies of our MOUs or contracts or collaborations that we have with other agencies?
That is another thing. We wanted to leave this up to you. You have the opportunity to upload those documents. There is a section on there about collaborations where we ask you, who else are you working with? One of the questions will specifically ask, who's employing your clients? Are you going to employ them directly yourself? Are you going to work with other community partners to employ these people? If so, do you have an MOU with that? Or is this kind of informal relationships, informal network, or you just hoping for the best? So yeah, we will ask about that, but again, it's not prescribed. We're not going to say we're only going to work with people who have formal written MOUs with employers. That may not be necessary in every circumstance. But if you do, we would like to hear about it, and we would like you to provide those. You'll have a chance to upload them. Yes.
With the program being only 18 months, will there be an expectation that we have a plan of how we can continue beyond this funding period?
Yes. So we don't want to just fund an initiative for 18 months and then have it dry up. So you will be asked in some of the financial sections to talk about what is the long-term sustainability of this program. And that's why we ask very specific financial data about what other resources did your agency bring to the table, what other financial partners do you have or investors do you have for this program specifically. So we don't want to invest in something that is going to have a short shelf life. So financially, we want to know that. And logistically, we want to know that. And there are parts where we'll ask you to kind of articulate that. Yes.
This kind of goes a little bit with hers as well, but there are no stipulations on age specifically either, such as high school students, for example, maybe from poverty-stricken families entering the workforce. Would that kind of also qualify, or does it need to be adults only?
We do not specify, we do not stipulate you must be serving adults. The overall goal is upward mobility for families. And so if that's a contributing member of the household, certainly relevant if you want to know about that. Yes.
Will we be able to ask questions leading up to the date?
Yeah, we're totally open to addressing your questions. If you do have further questions, you think of something after you leave today, you can always shoot me an email. I can't guarantee that I'll be able to address every specifics of your program because we want to be fair to everyone in the candidate pool, but we'll do our best to answer your questions. If there's anything burning now, any burning questions, feel free to speak up.
I missed the beginning. I didn't know if there was a range in regard to the grant award.
Yeah, very good question. So the total amount that we have to allocate is $250,000. The minimum ask is $20,000. So if you're only seeking $5,000, this is not necessarily a fit for you. And again, we don't have any expectations as to how many finalists or how many grantees we will allocate to in the end. So we could, if there's one application that stands head and shoulders above everything else, there's nothing preventing us from giving all 250 to that one. If there are quite a few finalists and ones that we want to invest in, that may be several. So we're just going to wait and see what applications come in.
Well, I'm excited.
Good. All right, we're excited too. Thank you all for coming. If you do think of other questions, you can always reach out, email me, call me. We're happy to discuss. Hopefully this has been informative and we're really excited to see your applications. And for those of you who are not already going to see Impact, feel free to reach out. We can make sure you get an account for us. All right, thanks for coming, everybody. Thank you.